Okie dokie.
Let's roll.
Let's roll. Where?
I don't know. You're the one.
Roll your less than boat.
Today I decided to be completely and utterly unprepared. So you are the one.
As in difference to usual.
Yes, but I'm even more unprepared than usual. I have been to 2 barbecues today, and I have decided that this is going to be the day where you lead the way, and I'm going to follow and see what is going to happen. So, what is the topic today?
I'm being oppressed.
Yes, yes.
The topic today is the continuation of a theme that we started a couple of episodes ago. We were talking about a little bit about the history of the Unix systems.
Okay.
And my idea after that was to do an episode which will go in parallel to that or in continuation to that, related to Windows systems. So specifically today we're going to talk about the Windows NT.
So the last Windows that worked.
All Windows today are based on NT.
Yes, I know, but the last Windows that worked.
Let's not get bogged down right now with that. We're coming back to it. Basically, I wanted to talk specifically about Windows NT for x86, not for any kind of other platforms, because there were versions for other platforms. Reason being that we're going to deal with those as well in future episodes, but we're going to deal with them in a little bit of a different way, because we do have some very weird machines somewhere here in the building that we got as from undisclosed company that we could use to install old Windows NT on another architecture.
I just wanted to say that we have much more hardware that is Windows NT 3.5 capable on other platforms that we have on actually Intel.
That's quite possible, actually, yes. So that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the way in which Windows NT came to be. We're going to talk a little bit about the history, the influence of NT to today's operating systems. Let's say we're going to exchange some information about parts of competition for that. We're going to talk a little bit about OS2 in parallel to it as well, because that's a story that's directly related to Windows NT, without going, knee deep into OS2, which we already agreed upon that it's going to be at least one separate episode, maybe even more. So that's our topic of the day. And with that being said, let's roll the intro. Okie dokie. You want to start or should I?
I'm probably going to start because I want to just have a personal opinion on Windows NT. Windows NT was probably the first time I moved away from DOS. Because back way then when I had my PC, what I tried were DOS, then I tried Linux. Mm-hmm. And then came along Windows NT, and Windows NT was promising. Windows NT 3.51 was something that we actually used as a day-to-day driver because way back then licenses were not that big of a problem. So using a server operating system on a desktop environment was something that was more or less okay for what you could do. Mm-hmm. And the other thing was that the applications that were actually existing back then didn't make so much fuss about running on operating system that is server based or desktop based. So Windows NT was actually a fully fledged operating system. Windows 95 wasn't. So
don't go to Windows 95 because NT came out before Windows 95. It was 1993.
Yes, a little bit, but yes, but the Windows NT was the thing that you. It was out in 95. It was out in 95.
No, 93.
But
first version was 93.
And anyway, okay.
You're talking about 351.
351, yes.
Okay, I get it.
The actual version that I tested.
Okay.
And
agreed.
This was something that you could choose between Windows 95 and Windows NT 351. And 351 was much more interesting package because you almost got the same things that you got on the newer version of the Windows, but at the same time, it was much more stable.
Okay. My story is a little bit different. I went from DOS to regular Windows 3.0, 3.1, and then with that Win32s extension, whatnot, and with workgroups as well. I played with that a little bit.
I'm just going to say one thing. I'm going to interrupt you and say I don't consider those Windows as Windows. I don't consider them as applications
I get it. Still, I just wanted to
because
make
I
a
was running
distinction.
Desk UX back way then. So
Yeah, okay. But after that, after I got my first 486, which was based on IBM's 486, which was the X4 120, then I moved to Windows 95. So my story doesn't circle directly to Windows NT. But soon after deploying Windows 95, which, as I usually jokingly say, is the only operating system in the history of IT that we didn't mind reinstalling twice a day or a week, depending on how much we were using them. I started first with Windows 95, and then I moved to NT-based system, but it wasn't as a daily driver NT 3.5 or 3.5.1 or 4. It was actually a little bit later than that. My first NT-based system that I was running on my computer was Windows 2000. And there was a reason why I was using that as a daily driver on a laptop, no less,
okay.
versus the desktop Windows, which we'll come back to in a second. You mentioned parts of the reason actually in your previous discussion. But on aside from that, I did use 3.5, 3.5.1, and 4 as some of the, let's say, some of the companies that I started working for on the side were using them. It was basically the beginning of my college education. That's in 1995 I signed in for college. Already in 1996 I started using Linux, and I started getting my first, let's say, side gigs, side hustles, side jobs as system admin, because Linux pushed me in that direction heavily. And 3.5 NT and 351 as well, which came a little bit later, and after that Windows NT4 were part of the business environment already back then. But my story also detours to Linux, and in 1996, which I tried for many, many years to make my daily driver as a desktop, and never succeeded. And as we jokingly discussed, in more than a few episodes, this is the year of the Linux desktop,
yes.
and it's not going to be, and everything is going to still be fine in the world. But yeah, that's my side of the story.
I'm going to say that I'm going to change my story. I don't think that this is going to be the era of the Linux. Linux desktop is never going to come to a point. But I think that Windows desktop is also going to fade away. I think that we are going to come to an era of hybrid desktop. We are going to have to decide first on which kernel are we going to drive on, and I think that Windows and Linux are so close to having a common kernel that it is annoyingly obvious that I think that the only thing that right now Microsoft is not doing, and they are not saying that they're going to do it, is they're not releasing the Windows version that is running on Linux kernel and then having all the services for the Windows architecture above it. So I think that there exists at least there probably is a project inside Microsoft that is trying to do this.
Okay.
Because Windows subsystem for Linux is so deep inside the Windows kernel that I wouldn't be surprised that there is something that is booting the Linux kernel first.
They actually discussed the capability of running X applications in WSL, so
yes.
I read about that.
And they work.
And that would be the step in that direction, even more so than.
If you do this, you have basically created the Windows operating hybrid desktop, and this is going to be a way forward. Unless Microsoft breaks everything with trying to incorporate cloud desktop into the desktop.
I thought when you said hybrid that you're going that way.
And this is going to be another annoying thing that we are going to have to live through.
I am never ever going to use that.
Okay, it depends on how much money Microsoft is going to spend on it and how much is this going to cost the companies.
Because then it's basically Windows becomes a subscription model.
Yes.
As a result of that, and we both made abundantly clear what we think about the subscription-based models.
I have no problems with the subscription-based models when somebody else is paying, or if they are free.
Yes, I agree. Okay, starting with the actual, let's say, history point of Windows NT. When Microsoft actually started working on NT-like operating system in the 80s, it was not the product of the 90s per se, and they actually started working on NT in tandem with IBM. The original, let's say, project was something like OS2 3.0 that they wanted to make kind of like central hub, or let's say a server operating system something. But later on, when that partnership dissolved, which is what happened as a part of the development process, and Microsoft went to Windows 3.0 on the desktop side of things, which became super popular all over the world. This is basically the inflection point at which the path of Windows desktop and NT-based systems and the OS2 start diverging.
But let's just stop for a bit and let's talk about the main difference between 3.5 NT and 3.0, then 3.2, then 3. Whatever
Desktop
the
version.
desktop
Okay.
version, because there is a significant
Yes.
there is this
They're completely different in technological background.
Yes, but when people see the desktop of Windows NT and don't recall how it was done back way then, they think that this is the same operating system.
It was as far away as possible within the realms of Microsoft ecosystem.
Yes, but since we are old, but no, not everybody is so old as us, so not everybody has tried it.
Okay.
We need to distinguish between the kernels, and we need to distinguish between how the operating system itself was running, because
Yeah.
Windows 3, the desktop version of Windows 3,
And 3.1
and
and
3.1,
3.11.
3.11,
Even
workgroups
Windows
and so on,
95, 98
were
to the fact.
basically user space applications.
Yeah, on top of DOS.
On top of DOS, and they were using extended memory. They were using different tricks to use the memory and so on. But they were user space applications.
Yep.
Windows NT was
A
kernel,
fully-fledged GUI.
a fully fledged operating system with its own kernel that was able to run directly on the CPU, that didn't have a separate operating system running it. So it was a separate operating system as we understand it today.
Correct. Yes, I
Okay.
completely agree with you. That's a very good summary.
Yes.
Executive summary.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, then basically to continue down the path of that part of the history, IBM continued OS2 the development. Microsoft went in its own direction with the development of both their desktop systems and the server-based systems. NT was basically meant to do that. And as a part of that divergence in multiple different paths, from the perspective of the IT industry, not only from Microsoft's perspective, a couple of very important things happened. First one being that basically the adoption of Microsoft-based OSs skyrocketed. The adoption of OS2 didn't as much, although they had very dedicated user base.
I still miss OS2 Warp.
Yeah, we're gonna have that discussion in another episode. I liked it a lot. I only
Yes.
tried it a couple of times and played with it for a limited amount of time, but its capabilities of preemptive multitasking, memory management, ability to run basically any kind of Windows application, and to have like multiple DOS windows opened and or Windows applications opened at the same time was something that Microsoft OSs could not do at that time.
And I think that there are still some things that are not available at this time yet on Microsoft Windows, especially the actual preemptive multitasking and the interrupt-based kernels, because the way the interrupts were handled in the US2 back way then was much better than what Microsoft was doing.
Yeah,
And
I remember reading about that recently as well. Yes.
And I remember that on the same hardware, because I had only one PC, so I had to switch operating systems. OS2 felt much quicker and much more responsive than Windows.
Actually, while we're on the topic of OS2, just to slightly do a slight tangent. When that battle was raging on the market, basically both of us were teenagers.
Yes.
We weren't even, maybe we were like mid-high school, maybe towards the end of high school when all of that was happening.
Okay.
And we were both, I think, if I remember correctly, feverish readers of the IT magazines already back then.
Yes.
And I remember reading about that battle in the magazines way back then when magazines were actually quite good still.
Yes.
And I was basically cheering for IBM at that point for some reason that I couldn't deduce, apart from the fact that their OS at that particular time was better. That there is no, I mean, technologically speaking, if you talk tech purely, OS 2 was definitely better than what Microsoft had with Windows 3.0, 3.11, all of
I
those
think that the
things.
main reason was that OS
I mean,
2.
do you remember it that way? That there was a big
Yes.
fight raging on the
Yes,
market?
there is a big fight raging on the market. It didn't look like OS2 is going to lose, because at the same time, as I the distinguish between NT and the desktop version of Windows, OS2 was also a fully fledged operating system.
Yes.
Much better than what was offered by Windows NT or desktop Windows. And the thing that I remember back then is not only that I was cheating the IBM to succeed with US2. The other thing was that they were neck to neck when it came to operating system. But when it came to desktop operating systems, OS2 was way better than what Windows was doing. So basically, some people realized that the kernel is the thing that we need to upgrade. So they upgraded the kernel, and Microsoft was pushing for the user interface, but they didn't push for the kernel to be able to do what it needed to do. So the multitasking and everything else. So my perspective is that back way then, OS2 was the way forward. And it felt like a way forward. And I honestly still don't understand what happened with IBM.
I do. We can simplify that or say that in a way in which you will understand, because it's one of your favorite sayings. I would say that IBM just was being IBM in a sense, but there's actually a larger humoristic, sarcastic point to be made here on that topic, on the topic of the OS2 warp versus the equivalent versions of Windows back then, which is that IBM made sure that they kind of tear off the defeat out of the mouth of victory, as we say.
Jaws of victory, yes.
Yeah, jaws of victory. They made a spectacular, like programmatic and corporate effort of doing that. That's the only thing I can say.
Yes, but, especially when you know that a lot of IBM hardware that came out of the IBM even much later, as far away as I think a couple of years ago, for example, ATMs, they were running on the OS2, and they had a lot of hardware that is coming out 10 years later after they quit the OS2, with OS2 installed. And there is so much hardware out there on the market that there is actually a version of OS2 that can be shipped right now. And we are going to talk about this in a separate episode.
Yeah, I love that topic, and
yes,
it's going to be very interesting for us. Okay, the starting point of the development of NT was actually already 32-bit operating system. That's also one of the fights that were raging on the market at that time. 8-bit moved to 16, 16 to 32-bit, and way later we started talking about 64-bit, but that's already 2000s. That's the first Microsoft desktop OS with 64-bit architecture was XP 64-bit, coincidentally one of the worst OSs that they ever did.
Yes,
and on the
and there is a huge competition on that part of the market.
Separate episode. Let's
Yes.
let's rate them, because I have some strong opinions just like you do about that. But it was actually quite a significant departure from the current way of thinking back then, because all of the OSs were 16-bit.
Yes,
which were used back then. And afterwards, after the initial onslaught of Windows NT 3, 3.5, 4, Microsoft went further with the development of that, and we feel the effects of that even to this day in Windows servers. Not so, partially in Windows client versions as well. But with servers, they went into another direction in terms of the marketing scheme and naming and whatnot. They started 2000, 2003, 2008, blah, 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 blah. Then dropped the NT from the name. And nowadays, if you ask them about NT, they will probably tell you, NT, what's that? What does that stand for? We don't remember,
Yes, and the other thing was that NT4 was the first time they realized that operating system for server should be able to run workstations. So should be able to control the workstations. This was the first time when they actually realized that they need to create some sort of an Active Directory or anti-workgroup
Yes,
based
2000
system.
is the first.
So
Active
NT4
Directory,
was
yeah.
the first workgroup based operating system that was coinciding with Microsoft realizing that you need usernames and passwords, and you need a system that is able to understand what the network is with Windows for workgroups. So there were different times back then.
Windows for workgroups. I love that. When I remember that, it just makes me smile. How
Yeah.
ridiculous that was.
No, the most ridiculous part was that they kept the same number, the version number, but they stuck Windows for Workgroups after the version number.
Yeah, WFG.
Yes,
The WFW.
So basically, you had an operating system, and then the ability to talk to a network card was advertised as a new functionality.
The only OS that pissed me off as much as that did was NetWare.
I quite liked one of Windows Workgroups. I liked that the idea of a fresh install meant that you were always the administrator. I like the idea that you could always press Control Delete and log in as administrator, whoever was logged in. I like the idea that the idea of the username and password didn't exist in the first version, so they just made it work later. The idea that they first started with a decentralized network because they couldn't create a centralized network because there wasn't nothing to centralize on. So there are a lot of concepts that I like about Windows for Groups.
Okay.
They were quite a good thing that happened to the IT, because this enabled people to realize that they need to do something, because Microsoft is not going to do it.
I think that probably it's evident that you have some strong opinions about that. We should do an episode about Windows for Workgroups.
I have. This was the first time when I realized that IPX networks are not the only ones, and that network is not network is not the only one. And then when this is the first thing that made me realize that Microsoft is not infallible. That Microsoft usually. It seemed that like Microsoft was just creating another system after another system that was working. And then suddenly you realize that they have absolutely no idea what they're talking about.
Okay. One of the, switching a little bit to the ideas and architectural, let's say, advancements that NT brought to the market. Its layered architecture that consisted of kernel mode and user mode.
Yes.
This was something that was a significant shift in the way in which operating systems were being run on, at least on Microsoft in a sense, because Unix-based models were already familiar with the methodology. It's not like it was something new. And the programs and the subsystems and the services and whatnot, all of that which was brought to the fold, then the hardware abstraction layer, super simple kernel, which was kind of like a little bit monolithic for all of the hardware, etc., etc., etc. But going back to what I said about Windows 2000, the reason why I was running that as a daily driver on my then AST netbook laptop, and AST is a company that if you want to look into that, you're going to find some very, very funny stories on YouTube. There are a couple of guys who used to work there who were made a funny, shambolic series of videos about that. But I chose it because it had the capability to work with network properly. And also, but this is around the time of Windows 98, 95 on the client side of things. Those OSs, you could not reconfigure network, TCP/IP part without reboot. 2000 could do that.
Yes,
that was one of my primary
they redid the TCP/IP stack, and they were able to reconfigure at least layer 2 and layer 3 in part, so that you were able to reconfigure the network.
But even in that, you can clearly see the difference between the NT-based system and the old-fashioned operating system on the client side, how different they were.
Okay, but to be completely honest, you didn't need to reboot the Windows 3.11 or whatever. You just needed to restart it because they were an application after all.
Okay, but Windows 95, 98, and second edition, you really needed to reboot everything.
Okay, but you didn't need to reboot it because it did it by itself. Eventually, if you waited long enough.
Yeah. That's also true.
Yes. So this is another thing, and the other thing. But let's talk about one more thing. Let's talk about 16 versus 32-bit.
Okay.
I think one of those things that defined the computing environment in the late 1980s, start of 1990s, and then into the middle of 1990s, is that people were expecting that each new version of the processor or each new version of a computer is going to come with a new version of the operating system.
Okay.
Because in the 80s, your computer was defined by its own operating system. You didn't have an operating system per se. You didn't have something that you could
Upgrade,
download
update,
and upgrade
install.
and change.
Correct.
And change.
It was in the computer already.
And then we went from 8-bit to 16-bit and then to 32-bit in a span of 6 or 7 years.
Yep.
So the speed of advancement in the CPU field was so quick that people didn't realize what is going to happen next. Everybody was expecting that everything is going to go and work as quick or be upgraded as quick as the processors. So jumping from 16 to 32-bit wasn't something that was unexpected.
It was discussed in public and in the IT magazines, and the fights about that, and the cheering fans of
yes, and never ending
all of that never ending story.
Never ending stream of people who think that 16-bit should be enough for everybody. And
Yeah,
yes,
640 kilobytes.
640 should be enough for everybody. But this is the normal thing. People hate the change.
But contrast that to today. Everything is 64-bit. Nobody's talking about 128-bit operating systems. Do you see the difference?
Yes, because they, in most part, don't know what the operating system is that they're running on. Sometimes they do because they realize that the Windows 10 that they installed is unable to work with the amount of memory that they have in their computer. So they need to do something to enable the rest of the memory. But this is as far as it goes. And they are completely blissful of the idea of the graphic card being 128-bit.
Or 256
or 256 or whatever, yes.
Whatever it is. Yeah, I agree with you.
But the computer architecture today is not something that people
generally concern themselves
with. Think about, or even try to think about.
Why is that?
Computer is a commodity.
I think that it's also because computers are fast enough.
Computers are fast enough, but they're a commodity. Back way then, you also had the computers that were fast enough with what they did. For example, a PDA was a PDA. It was an okay thing. But right now, since your computer can do everything, it's a commodity. You just buy a new one, lose the old one, and that's it.
Okay.
So you don't care what's inside.
You're talking about yourself or about everybody?
Mostly about everybody, because people are not right now. I don't think that people are concerned about losing a computer, breaking a computer, because they know that the computers are they are not cheap, but they're not as expensive as they were.
Oh yes.
And they are something that you can just replace.
Well, that the level of pain that you're going to have with that depends on where you keep the data.
Yes,
but
long live the cloud. Long live the cloud.
No, that's a separate discussion that we're going to soon have. Yeah, you covered user interface, which is a good point. User interfaces between these OSs, so NT side versus the desktop side, it was like night and day, definitely. Yes. The differences were also in functionalities, because the desktop OSs were really lousy in terms of hardware support, network support, internet support, and all of that. I remember running, Trumpet WinSock and all of those.
You had to run, in order to have any network experience on Windows on the desktop, you basically had to run third-party applications.
Yeah, you could run, let's say, bits and pieces of the network, even in DOS, with specific network cards that were supported, and they were very low.
But it was a clutch. It was a clutch. Basically, it was everything was a patch upon a patch, and it was working in some parts of the operating system.
It's the same story as with optical devices. Back then, drivers for the optical devices were basically run during the operating system boot in DOS.
Okay, but people,
MSC DEX.
Yes, but people weren't that concerned with it, because way back then we had graphic drivers to display certain kinds of fonts. We had a special driver to be able to support the mouse. So we
still have that today.
Yes, we did. We weren't so concerned about having a different driver, but we were more aware of it because we had to actually explicitly load it. So I think that the operating system itself was just, right now, it's just hiding it. But there is a driver for everything in your computer.
One of the things that was introduced in Windows NT, which still exists today, actually, on the server side of things, is the capability to do VPN. And I think that was actually a very significant moment in the development of the server operating systems. If you have the capability, back then it was PPTP. Nowadays you have many more protocols that are supported. And PPTP is not necessarily very secure today, but back then it was a big deal because that meant that you can actually do VPN as we know it today.
Okay, but I would say that this is one of those things that when I actually can say that I'm a little bit of a Microsoft hater because they also did it halfway. The pop and chop were done in a clear text format, so they first started for some reason that only they understand. They always tend to start things by creating something that works, becomes a sort of kind of de facto standard in the market, but it's in its core is non-functional in some way, being unsecure, being obsolete because it can't route something, it can do something else. So this is one of those things.
Yeah, you were doing the 2 semesters of Microsoft-based lab work in this academic year, so you're familiar with this even more now than what you were in the past, although you knew it back then as well.
Yes,
but the service that is running this, so the network service that is running this in Windows, I think it hasn't been upgraded in more than 10 years. So it doesn't it has support for PPTP, L2TP, IPsec, nothing else. And it has been like that for many, many years. And there are 5 or 6 different models of using that service to do something, and some of them still to this day don't work properly, like routing, for example.
When we talk about Windows and VPNs and everything else, I'm sometimes amazed on how Microsoft actually invested money in stuff like direct access or something like this.
That's where I was going with this,
and then they completely dropped the ball when it comes to implementing it.
No, direct access was always awesome. It's just that they stopped supporting it a couple of years ago, which
was it always awesome when you had to have 2 consecutive IP addresses in the IP4 range if you wanted to deploy it?
I had no problem with that.
I wouldn't call it awesome back then.
Okay.
It was a problem.
No. If you discount these picky little details that you are picking from the pile, the service worked perfectly, had almost 0 issues, wasn't difficult to troubleshoot if it had some. It was HTTPS based, which meant that the only real thing that you needed to worry about yourself with was certificates, which were easy enough to do if you knew your way around them, which we do, so it's not a problem for us. And it worked for many, many years, even for this company. A lot of people are still using it to this day without any issues whatsoever. Okay, we can definitely go into the details of the fact that some of the routing capabilities don't work properly. Sometimes there are issues with various, let's say, other services. If direct access server is not working properly, like network location services, which can break Active Directory if you go too far with it. So yeah, there are so many details that are not necessarily done in a correct architectural fashion.
I think that main thing that I'm always accusing Microsoft of is that they are trying to bundle services. For some reason or the other, they refuse to acknowledge that it is completely feasible to create a system that is going to be consisting of different services that are not going to be interconnected.
So jack of all trade, master of none.
But for some reason they are binding services together. For no reason. They insist of VPN being part of
routing service
or location service, and you can do it in other ways.
Actually, architecturally speaking, that makes a lot of sense that they made that decision, although it's impractical when you have problems. So that much you're correct. But the reason why they did it that way is because they have those free firewall and network profiles. And for everything in network and Active Directory and direct access to work, you need to be in certain profile for that.
Okay.
For that reason, you have an NLS, network location server, and if that doesn't work properly, then you have problems distinguishing in which profile you are, which in turn then, those beautiful signs on the computer, on the system tray, when it starts telling you that you are not connected to internet or whatnot, or not a part of the domain while you are. Yeah, I know that. But there are architectural reasons why they did it that way. I'm not saying that it's perfect, but there are reasons why.
I know there are reasons why, but I think they are completely wrong. Because my perspective on this is that they had to create a solution for a problem that they made.
No, actually, there is one other reason that why I consider this to be a very good solution. It was group policy deployable.
Okay.
At the time when nothing else was.
Okay. But we can agree on that.
It was really good for from that perspective, and as I said, it just worked. And the wizard created the necessary server and the client policies for you, so you didn't need to manually configure anything, and that was also very good.
So what are you going to do when Microsoft suddenly doesn't understand what group policies are in the cloud?
And no OUs and stuff like that. I don't know.
Yes.
Yeah, we're gonna spool up Azure gateways and pay them in thousands of euros per month.
I think some, by the way.
To do what? VPN?
No, to do the Active Directory.
Oh, you mean SMB
Yes,
on Linux?
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
But that's based on, I think, 2008 or something like that schema, so it's a little bit too old.
Okay, but it supports GPOs.
It does. And they
yes,
work. Yeah,
yes, they work, yes.
You are such a troll.
Yes.
Okay. One other thing. So I'm still on the topic of architectural advancements of NT.
Okay.
I think they're very important. To this day, they are important, actually. NT was the first real operating system that supported SMP.
Okay.
Multiple. At that time, it was multi-socket, single core. And from that, you have a whole lineage of other products till this day that support multiple CPUs, whatever the amount is. So that was the first real Microsoft OS that supported that.
Just one more point. Way back then, the thing that also needed to be said is that the difference between a server and the desktop
And the
or
workstation, yeah.
wasn't so clear.
I would say that for me, it was clearer than today, but okay, go ahead.
I think that the differences, especially between workstations and servers, weren't that much. I would say they weren't so visible to a user. Okay, there were differences, but today, when you control a server and when you buy a server has a certain amount of functionality that wasn't available back then. So your server was basically way back then was better motherboard with better support for some kind of hardware, with better drivers, but you didn't get bells and whistles that you have today.
Okay.
So I think that one of the reasons why we were able to run Windows NT on the desktop boards and on the desktop itself was because the hardware itself wasn't so different. You couldn't pull that today.
And the driver support for the NT lineage of products was actually quite good.
Yes.
It was quite good. They were much better than the, let's say, Windows's 3.x, 9x's, etc., that were highly problematic with drivers. Yeah, I agree. It had integrated web server.
Yes.
First OS that had IIS, Internet Information Services.
Unfortunately, it was the first OS that came with all the bells and whistles installed.
Bells.
For whom
the bell tolls.
So the bells and whistles were all installed. This is one of those things that Microsoft was too late to understand and then implement. So they started installing everything that they created because they thought that the people should be able to see it. So everything was installed.
Okay. NT was quite good with software compatibility with Windows 9X applications, whatnot.
Yes.
I don't remember ever having a problem starting a single one of them. And they were, and I cannot stress this enough because this is something that I think often of. NT versions of the systems were so much more stable than the desktop OSs.
I already said this.
Yes, you did, but we need to stress this out, that it was a very big difference between those two OSs.
I'm going to say this. The only time when I realized that I'm going to have to switch from server-based OSs to desktop-based OSs from Microsoft is when I realized that NT4 is unable to support USB.
Okay.
And then they did an update that was a USB update, so the USB was once again supported. But it was in 1999.
It was too late,
It
basically,
was
from your
basically too late.
perspective.
I
You
had
needed
to.
it then.
Yes, I had to switch over to USB, and it was one of those moments when I realized that Microsoft is not going to provide feature by feature compatibility between the versions,
Okay.
and so that the best of both worlds is not going to be available in both worlds.
Okay.
So this is when I started caring about, when I stopped caring about Windows 94.
Okay.
And then Windows 2000 was okay. The next version that I was using from day to day was 2003.
I used 2000 Advanced Server on my laptop. I used 2003 extensively.
2003, I used it for, from all things, I used it for wireless bridging. Because I had...
After you start the wireless service, it was doable. Yeah.
Yes, because I
Just
had,
like today.
we were trying to do a community network that was spanning hundreds and hundreds of computers in hundreds of locations. And I had a few locations where I had installed Windows 2003 because the footprint itself was much smaller than the comparable desktop system. It has a remote. It had a remote desktop,
Yes.
so it was
Remotely manageable.
remotely manageable, and the networking was working. So I was able to run a network bridge and to bridge and reconfigure the networks.
Coincidentally, using the same service that we previously discussed.
Yes,
routing
and
remote
unfortunately,
access.
yes, unfortunately, yes, but it was able to do that.
Yeah. I used it. I started my, let's say, system engineering job as a service to others on 2003. I used that OS extensively across multiple companies. Some of them were using it to run everything from, domain controller, file server. I even had a client that was running the 2003 plus file server plus DNS plus DC plus Exchange plus this plus that for many years. And that server, you did not want to reboot it because it took 45 minutes for that to boot. You didn't want to update as well. And already the next version, 2003 R2, was one of the worst pieces of crap that I've ever seen on the server market specifically. But that's, I think, the topic for another day. I would kind of like us to stop at roughly 2000, as we have many things to add to the future episodes about the OSs that came after that. I would kind of say, and this just popped into my head now that I've processed what I said. After 2000, a lot of the stuff that Microsoft was doing, generally speaking, went in some very weird ways.
I think that what happened to Microsoft and what is happening to Google, what is happening to all the large companies, including IBM, is that from time to time, and it comes in waves, they have enough development potential and not enough managerial potential. And then they start throwing things at the wall and trying to see what sticks. And sometimes they completely miss the wall. And I think this is one of those times for the IBM right now, with all the Red Hat fiasco things that are going on right now, because I think that Red Hat in IBM completely lost its
way.
I wouldn't call it lost
Purpose?
the way. They lost the entire idea why they are there, and this has happened to Microsoft numerous times. This has happened to Google. And when you take a look back and take a look at all the big corporations right now, being in Microsoft, Google, Facebook, IBM, even Apple, they haven't done a lot based on their own development. They acquired a lot. They used parts of the functionality of the companies that they acquired, but
they stopped innovating a little bit.
They stopped innovating at all. And the other thing is that they are actually continuously acquiring new companies, running them into the ground, and gaining nothing out of it.
I would say that, with all due respect, that's more IBM than anybody else.
But it's also Google and Facebook.
I don't know.
I
would say that Microsoft is not that.
After the Facebook came out, what else was done by Facebook and was successful?
They bought Instagram and WhatsApp. That's
yes,
they successful.
bought. That's hugely
successful.
Yes,
as we know. Okay, cool. Basically, the Windows 2000, when they came out after the NT40.
Yes.
As I said, that was my daily driver for quite a bit of time, actually.
Okay.
I remember back in college sitting in our IEEE room back in the basement. My friend and I were running. He had a laptop, I had it, and we were, network connected to our faculty network, and everything was working really well. This was probably the first, let's say, visual GUI-based OS from Microsoft that I was happy with, because it was unbreakable. It worked perfectly, no issues with it whatsoever. I was very happy with that. And after that, when I started playing more with desktop OSs, that's a different story. And it's, I think, a story for another day. What I would say is that Windows 2000 as a direct, let's say, descendant of the NT as well, NT4 specifically, brought a couple of, yet again, significant changes, innovations, let's call it that way. The first major one, which we mentioned, was Active Directory, which is incredibly important to this day. The most important.
I think this is one of those things where Microsoft, for some reason or the other, made a complete success out of something, and didn't do a lot of errors, a lot of mistakes. Active Directory was designed in such a way that it works. It worked from the start. It didn't have many hiccups. It also gets updated only when it needs to. So they're
and you can update it yourself.
Yes, and they have a conservative approach to it, and yet it works.
I would say, if you want to support my metaphor, food, drink, sleep, walk, Active Directory. It's a fact of life.
Yes,
in IT specifically.
And I think that I have a strong suspicion that somebody laid off the entire Active Directory team a couple of decades ago.
Generations ago.
So there is nobody to poke around the code, and nobody understands how the code works. So nobody.
But it works.
But it works, so we are not changing it.
And nobody's fiddling with it. That's what you wanted to say. Okay. The second change was user interface, and this is something that I cannot stress how much it pisses me off on the both client and the server operating systems for the stuff that Microsoft has done since. 2000 was, I think, the first OS that introduced that classic look, if you remember that, which was clean, functional. It did not abuse your hardware. It didn't need soft shadows and encoding and decoding and 3D and whatnot for it to work. Aqua and similar blah, whatever you want
Alpha
to call
channels,
them. Please
transparencies,
don't. Please don't.
Animations.
Please don't. Yeah. This is where I think they kind of lost the plot, because as evidenced by a lot of things that happened afterwards, when they removed the classic view from their both desktop and the server OSs, hundreds of thousands and millions of people did what? They installed classic shell or something like that to get it back. And I was just one of them.
Yes, and I'm going to just go one step further and say that even in Windows 11, there are still parts of the operating system that use the classic look. So you can, if you dig deep enough, you can find the classic look in some Windows applications, because they haven't changed the entire user interface of the Windows.
What I want. I want somebody to find a set of registry settings, true, false, which we can input, or registry file would be even better, which reverts that stupid UI back to classic look.
What I would like is to have a nice chat right now about Windows printing subsystem.
Please no. Please no, for the love of God, no.
Because I want to just say how incredibly idiotic it came out when it was first working on Windows 10.
Still is.
No. Let's talk about the first one on Windows 3. Then let's talk about the amount of network, the amount of drivers that you had to have to drive your printer, even though your printer was actually supporting something called ESC2, or if it's about Epson, or PostScript, heaven forbid,
or
PCL, whatever. So you had standardization on the side of the printers, but no standardization on the side of the operating system. Then Microsoft started realizing that the thing that they could do was host-side rendering of the pages. Then they went through 2 or
Which
3.
I think it still does to this very day.
Yes, but they went to 2 or 3 ways of rendering.
Mm-hmm.
They created a bunch of incompatible hardware that was running on Windows 95 but wasn't running on Windows 98 because they changed the Windows printing subsystem. Then they changed it again, and I think that they changed it again in the last 10 years. So Windows printing subsystem, okay, the...
You want to tell me that that's a metaphor for what Microsoft does? Is that your
No, but it is amazing that abomination as printers are, is being...
the worst piece of hardware ever invented?
Yes, they're just the bane of the existence of the normal system administration.
Unless we're talking about 4L.
4L, HP4L, and 4100 HP, which were amazing machines. Unbreakable machines. But having said that, the abomination as the printers are, was even worse because Microsoft kept getting it worse. So they kept switching. They kept getting the problems worse because they kept switching the drivers. They made the manufacturers change the drivers. So they had to create different versions of the drivers for different versions of Windows, and the drivers were completely different. So you had to have
because the driver model was different.
Yes, but the driver model kept changing so much that you had to have the amazing floppy with the driver
with 120 directories inside for different OSs. I know. But while you're talking about that, I remembered one thing. I was lucky, and I think you mentioned something to the fact, but way later in your life, I was quite lucky that I got the 4L, LaserJet 4L, very early. I already had it in high school when I had my some of my first computers, and I was already spoiled by it, because it was basically unbreakable. You just give it to toner, you give it to the paper, and it just keeps on printing and printing. Before that, I had Epson 800 XL, which was a dot matrix printer.
Yes.
That's completely different. That was breaking all the time.
I had my story is entirely different. I had an Epson LQ something 100, I think, and I think I still have it, and I think it still works.
I would like to still have my 4L because it never disappointed.
It didn't have enough memory.
Yes, it was problematic in that way, but it was also very good in some other ways.
Yes.
But I was running that printer actually on all of the above mentioned OSs, and it always works.
And I think it still works because I'm not completely sure, but I think that I saw it in a company that I was working for at least a decade ago, and I went to their offices a couple of weeks ago, and I think that I saw one of the 4Ls still running.
Okay, I now officially designate you as my 4L get me guy.
So I need to acquire the 4L.
Yes.
Acquire 4L, okay.
From some pile of garbage somewhere, if it still works, yeah.
Okay.
The next big change was plug and play.
When it worked, yes.
Yes. This was a quantum shift in the way in which we deployed hardware. I think the opposite of that deserves a completely separate practical episode. I have a load of cards back home, which use jumpers and whatnot.
Yes.
And we could easily explain that, because plug and play finally brought a lot of chaos back to order in terms of PC hardware, as it wasn't so difficult to make hardware work anymore. And that started with sound cards, controllers, later on went to network cards, SCSI controllers, whatnot. Although there were still situations in which you had hardware issues clashing between them, because a lot of times you were running plug and play compatible and incompatible hardware in the same system.
Yes, it was a confusing time to be in
hardware enthusiast.
Yes, because I don't think that it was only the problem of being a hardware enthusiast. It was also a time where the designers of the hardware were trying to understand how the USB should be working. And the USB...
Which they don't understand, coincidentally, to this very day.
Yes. So USB...
Another episode.
USB by itself is more or less broken. It was always broken. But for a normal computer and a normal user that is using a couple of devices, it works. And the other thing is that when I think about how it was working way back then, the idea of your computer being able to understand which device was connected, to understand what can be installed about it, and to have a central
It's called
repository of
database,
driver data.
you know how I know about that?
No.
Because I broke it while updating a domain controller in our infrastructure here.
Oh, it's a nice way to understand how it.
Windows driver database is broken. Reinstall the OS basically.
Okay, so anyways, but having something that is that can be considered a central database that is supporting all the hardware that is available on the market with a big asterisk, but all the market, all everything is supported, and being able to auto detect it and then install it without rebooting was an amazing feat of engineering.
Although we mostly, for the first couple of years, called that feature plug and pray. Yes.
But the rebooting part was something that sometimes happened occasionally just because it did.
I remember that some of these drivers didn't need to reboot, just a restart of the UI, in Windows 95, 98. Do you remember that?
Or the UI itself just broke and restarted itself because it just kept doing this, and this is a normal part of the operating system.
And a part of that story is actually that's when we started switching to ATX power supplies, and shutting down computers became a hilarious activity.
Yes, yes. I still miss. I'll be completely honest. I'm still miss the old clicky AT switches.
Agreed.
Because they were cool as anything else.
You could change those keys as well.
No, I was looking at all the episodes of Computer Chronicles. And
did I finally get you to go back to that?
No. It kept because you are watching it. I'm also watching because Google is not paying attention to what you and me are doing. They are not connecting our streams now.
No.
So
all the connections coming from the same IP, the same company. Yeah.
Yes. So what I see is that what I miss is the big 80 switch on the IBM PCs, that big clicky switch with the big 0 and big 1 on the side. I still miss that mechanical switch. I was thinking
so old.
No, I was thinking about how to re-implement it in such a way that I can get the switch to run, and then to have some sort of electronic circuit that is going to just get the impulse out.
Do you know what I miss? While we're on the topic of that reminiscent, let's say, part of our old life.
Yes.
I miss the LEDs with the frequency. That was so cool.
And the turbo button.
And the turbo button, yes, of course. Yes. Corresponding turbo button. Without it, no point.
Okay.
Other advancements. Security. EFS. 2000 was the first OS that had a encrypted file system in Windows. Hugely important. Complete internet integration, application compatibility, and it is the first OS that had the basics of what Microsoft uses to this very day, which is the Microsoft Management Console, MMC. Without them, a lot of times when I'm doing my work, I would be completely lost.
I'm going to say that at the same time, I like MMC as an idea, and I hate its guts.
I love it to death, and I resent Microsoft for removing a lot of additional snappings, like Exchange snappings for MMC, because they were super useful.
I think that they should be keeping the snappings current as they do the PowerShell.
Correct. And UI.
And UI. And I think that even if they are unable to do the UI, because sometimes I think that they are unable to do UI because it's too complicated, they should be providing snappings, always.
Agreed.
But MMC itself looks ugly.
It does.
And it's a framework. And this framework is not... I think that this became something that was shipped, although it was meant just for developers. So it feels like something that wasn't...
Semi-finished?
Yes, it feels like it wasn't meant to be a production-ready system, but it was just a placeholder where developers were able to plug in their modules. And then somebody realized, okay, this is an interesting thing and it could be used, so let's ship it.
For our viewers who don't know what MMC is, Microsoft Management Console is a modular concept of an application that can use snap-ins, additional modules, so that you can manage various types of Microsoft applications and services.
Okay, but let's...
In a visual sense,
step
kind of.
a little bit back, and let's say the complete internet connectivity.
Mm-hmm.
Let's remember the nice things about internet connectivity. Let's remember about...
There are nice things about internet connectivity.
Let's remember that the Microsoft Internet Explorer, was integrated into the operating system.
You want to talk about the lawsuit?
No, I want to talk about the channels. Do you remember the channels?
man.
The idea of directly
You are the
integrating
bane of my life sometimes.
the idea of directly implementing executables inside the data stream that is connected to the internet, that it can be run in a kernel mode.
Could possibly go
What
wrong.
could possibly go wrong? So,
Yes, I agree.
so
man.
some of those things that you mentioned are a good thing, but some of those things were complete failures.
No, that's the nature of the business. Companies reinventing themselves, and that's a very diplomatic way of saying what you wanted to say. Yeah. Okay. What else? We're going to talk about the OS2 related things in a completely separate episode because we are getting close to the end of this one. It's been long enough. I think I would also add a couple of things before we wrap this up. NTFS, very significant.
Which version?
No, NTFS, just as a file system came out of windowsnt development, which we still use to this very day, which is millions of miles better than the FAT32, 16, 8, whatever, 12, doesn't really
Okay,
matter
but
which
writing
ones.
things down on post-it notes is better than the FAT. So I think
No, it's not.
you can implement permissions on the post-it notes. You couldn't do that.
In fact, yeah, I agree.
Yes.
That security-wise, it was crap.
But
Yeah.
so as I think that NTFS was I wouldn't call it a good file system back way then, if it weren't for the permissions and the idea of having actual objects. So they were able to actually write some file data inside the operating system or the file system without having to create kludges like what macOS did for a long time.
I would actually go against you on this one. NTFS is super significant for the development of Windows OSs. I agree on that. We both do. But I still think it's a crappy file system to this day. From the practical standpoint, as somebody who's done 20 years plus of administrating Windows file servers, do not get me started.
I didn't say that it is a good operating system today.
No.
I said that it was a great idea back then. It was a leap forward from the FAT, and it was an amazing file system back way then. But it just stopped doing anything to implement anything that can be useful today. And so it's stuck in the 2000s. Let's call it 2000s.
Okay. Protected memory model, preemptive multitasking, RPC.
RPCs.
Yeah, RPC super important.
Okay, but this was lifted from the Unixes, and the idea of RPC was linked with Unix. But they had to do it.
Yeah,
they had to do it.
I think I don't know, grown older or maybe a little bit wiser with age. I used to resent Microsoft for copy-pasting a crap load of stuff into their operating systems. We were all witnesses to that over past 30 plus years. But I kind of went the other direction because I understood that these features needed to be implemented and reinventing hot water is not an option.
Okay, but I'm with you. I'm with you on this. I hate it when they copy paste stuff that is unneeded. So animations, look and feel, the stupidest idea of having a start button in the middle of the screen that is happening right now on the Windows 11 and so on.
Search not working.
Yes, search not working with Windows 10 and so on. But when they implement, I would call it deep level stuff. So kernel level stuff like RPCs, like permissions, like file systems, they usually do it okay. So I think that this is some of those things that they actually managed to do just right.
Good job with. Yeah.
Pretty decent job with it. Okay. And so it was one of those models that made sense.
Still used to be this very day heavily.
I'm going to say that the thing that I was missing, and I still don't understand why it is happening this the way it is, because I'm not the developer and I didn't take enough time to understand it, is the inconsistencies in the way that inter-process communication was developed, not using RPCs but using networking.
Okay.
There are a lot of inconsistencies in the using of TCP/IP stack and the way that
socket-based communication.
Yes, and the TCP/IP stack and the way it uses different pathways and different ideas on how to reference cards when it comes to the operating system. So this is something that is, I think, still
done much better in Linux, I think.
Yes. It's much more consistent in Linux.
Yeah. Okay. What else? VMI.
VMI is
Very
one of those
important.
things. Yes, I think it's
We probably hate its guts. but it's still very important.
I think that
Anybody who's ever done VMI filtering in group policies in Active Directory will surely know what we're talking about.
But EMI is a kind of a pearl thing. Once you realize how it works, it's an amazing tool. But it's a pain in the ass to realize how it works.
Yeah, and Microsoft is not helping with documentation.
Yes, but once you realize what you can expect from it and what it's capable of doing, you are going to invest the time needed. And what I'm bothered is that Microsoft is at the same time still working on VMI
And SIM as well.
and working on PowerShell and working on all the different ways that you can control the operating system. Right now, they seem to be shifting a little bit towards SSH for some reason.
Yeah, I noticed that as well.
Because they are distributing the operating system with the OpenSSH server, disabled.
Can I give you a point of discussion for future episode?
Yes.
Maybe they're doing this for Ansible reasons.
It could be, but right now your SSH is going to end up in the command shell of the normal command shell, not in the PowerShell, and this is also something that is
Currently
puzzling.
unuseful.
That is puzzling. No, that is puzzling. Because what I would expect is just to have a registry key that would say, okay, I want this login program as we have in some other operating systems. So if I SSH into the machine, I want to have this, whatever it is, the shell.
Oh
Yes.
yeah, like in any Unix of
And
since forever.
this capability actually exists.
It does.
The login shell exists in the Windows. So I don't know why it's working this way as it is.
Maybe we could look into that as well.
Okay. So what did you want to tell me about NT?
No, I think I'm done with all.
Because
the
I
pluses
see
wanted
that
to
in
get.
the last that you are purposefully ignoring the Windows NT introduced a robust and scalable printing architecture.
Of course.
Yes, but it was robust. It was
was.
scalable.
Do you know why I'm skipping it?
No.
Because I have absolutely zero tolerance for that service over the past 30 plus years that I've been using it.
Okay.
Only causing me pain, suffering, and wasting my time very efficiently.
Let's talk about one of the services that is still living to this day, and it was introduced in Windows NT.
Which is?
Windows faxing. Windows Fax Service is one of those services that is completely untouched by the passing of the time. It still exists in the Windows Server. I think you can install it in the Windows Server 2022. I didn't check.
I can check. Go ahead.
But when you install it in any version of the Windows, the first thing that you're going to notice is that it is going to install it in its own separate directory. It is going to contain an ini file for the configuration. It is going to have its own separate.
Yeah, it's there.
It's going to have its own separate input and output queues inside directories under Windows directory.
Yeah, spool.
And it is going to call itself Windows NT Fax Spool.
That's awesome.
So this is this is something that is amazing, because some of the things that they introduced, they didn't even bother to check.
I have two things to say about that. For the love of Christ, no sane person should be using a fax. And then comma, it is still quite useful for some things.
I would
also add that there are so many public services here in Croatia that are still insistent on sending them faxes. Think of it what you will.
I'm going to say one of those things that I haven't checked in a while, but at least 4 or 5 years ago when I last checked, in Canada, the only way to send medical documentation in order to be verified was by using a fax. So you could send the fax with the cover page of the documentation, then send an email, but you had to send a fax. And
I understand that as a double authentication or multi authentication method, but it's
strange.
crazy.
It's strange using something that is completely unencrypted and using basically a stream of zeros and ones as two-bit image, being able to verify anything. But here we are. So Windows NT faxing was something that was introduced and something that was actually working.
You really had to go there.
Yes, because I'm that old and it was annoying as hell to run it. And still, I think it has been at least 10 years since I last installed some fax. And
The best application in the history of mankind for that was called WinFX Pro.
WinFX Pro. And
Coincidentally, on Linux, it worked perfectly.
coincidentally, using this WinFX, this service, and using, I know that it is able to run on Windows 10. You can still do remote faxing from clients using a GPO. It can be done. It is not a nice thing to do to people, but it can be done.
If you want to troll them via fax, I think that's your next step in development. Yeah, I'm giving you crazy ideas now.
Yes. I see a fax to email gateway being installed somewhere.
Yeah. Oh, I remember that. Okay, let's wrap this up. So we talked about the windowsnt lineage of products. We're going to stop roughly now around the era of Windows 2000 for a reason, and we're going to keep on going through the history of these products in the future. Thank you for listening to us today. This was another episode of ThatITShow podcast. I've been Vedran.
I've been Yasmin, and I hope that we didn't make you hate Microsoft more than I do.
You don't hate Microsoft, you just resent them for rational things that you should for.
Okay, so but sometimes I'm being irrational about hating.
Yeah, you're known to be irrational, yes.
Okay, so anyways, thank you for being with us, and see you next time.
Yeah, bye.